Hi, I am Jennifer Purcell, and welcome to my podcast, Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge, where we will discuss, discover, and learn more about the challenges and triumphs of those with NLD and other learning challenges. I do have a website for this podcast, and it is called livingwithnld.com. I also have a Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter account for the podcast. They are all under the same name, which is Living with NLD. I also have a YouTube channel for the podcast, which can be found by Googling the title of the podcast, which is Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. I would like to tell you about a nonprofit that I use for my research for this podcast. It is called the NVLD Project, and I use their blog for my research. They are a nonprofit that is based in New York and is trying to get NVLD back on the DSM, and they provide many resources for people with NVLD on their website. I'll provide you with the website for them in the podcast description. All proceeds from the ads on this podcast will be donated towards the NVLD project. Please feel free to explore the other topics on the podcast, and hopefully you will learn something new from them. I hope you enjoy today's episodes. And today I am very excited to announce that BetterHelp is now sponsoring this podcast. I have had 7 years of therapy, so I know it can help change your life if you not only let it, but work on the personal goals that you set with your therapist. Without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy works. But what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles and start feeling better because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. Join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are the greatest asset. And special offering to listeners of Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/. I'll put in the link in the podcast description for you. That's BetterHelp, HELEP. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast. I also want to mention to you that I just launched my podcast swag on Wednesday of this week and have a page for it on my website, and I will also send you the link to it in the podcast description, and I will also send it to you in the newsletter that I usually send out on Fridays. I am now selling t-shirts, water bottles, and a backpack, and they all have the podcast logo and title on it and the tagline. So I am looking forward to watching the sales and seeing who buys them and spreading the word more about my podcast. Good morning, and I hope you are enjoying the new podcasts that I created, which, again, if you haven't heard of them, one of them is called Shiro, Be Your Own Hero, and that one was about heroism and inspiring yourself to be your own hero in your life instead of trying to look for others to be your hero or mentors. And then the second one is called Think Out for Your Imagination. And that one is about the imagination I had when I was growing up and how I imagined that I could fold up my house into pocket size and take it with me wherever I wanted. And then the next one is Chats, Barks, and Growls, combos with your pet. That one is probably the most fun one because I get to do my voice. And I get to do Truffle's voice. And just, you know, uh, tell you what I think dogs think throughout the day and what they think about their owners. So that one's fun for me. So today's episode will be the fifth part to the interview that I did with Olivia. And again, she is one of the project social ambassadors for the NVLD project, and she is from the East Coast. And she has MLD and although muscle tone.
Like now I'm detecting so many more social cues than I ever did in college. Now I'm understanding like more questions than I ever did before. There were still some questions in college that were hard, even that. But then there was that like one class I had where this teacher wanted us to just read a chapter and then take a quiz on it, which for me didn't. I dropped that class because I couldn't do it. I couldn't read that chapter and then take questions. I had to have her teach the chapter before I would, so I could be able to understand it, then take the quiz. And so I dropped that class and I had no shame of dropping that class because that class wasn't for me. You know, it may have been for somebody else. It wasn't for me. And in that retrograde of finally like, okay, and then there are some even classes in college where the brick wall just smashed on the first day versus like, and I saw it as like, think of a wrecking ball, like coming into it. So smashed it the first day. And there are other classes where it only left cracks. And in those, I found my ways of growing up with that melody and figuring out. So, and my advice to you, to those listening who haven't or anything, or struggling in school, like for instance, one of the things I found out that was so helpful for me was if I had a class where I saw the syllabus and the teacher in the first week, I knew I was going to struggle in that class, I would go up to the teacher and I would say, hey, so with this unit or this subject you're talking about, I have a couple questions. Can you answer them for me? I have an NVLD. And at the time I told my teachers knew anyway. So they knew, so they were helping me understand if I had questions and they would answer it in that much regard. But it made me understand this stuff. It made me not hate school. It made me understand it better. It made me see, in a way, looking at that in life. If I don't outside now of school, if I have a question or wondering, wait, why did that happen? Or how did that happen? Or like, for instance, I'll hear a story. And I'm trying to think of like, oh God, it just happened last weekend with my friends, and my friends are saying, I'm like, wait, what are you saying? This and this and this. And they're like, oh no, this, I meant this. And they were kind of like, it was kind of they're kind of deconstructing what they were saying so I could understand it. And it was only because I asked them. And so that, and they didn't think, I was dumb or stupid. They just answered it in a different way. And I think what we have and our learning disability is something that prevents us from understanding certain things and fully understanding faster and quicker than some other with other things. So there's with our symptoms, because like I said, it's like that long-term memory where, like, for instance, or I would say this working memory too. So for instance, I passed algebra in high school because I memorized 28 numbers of pi, and my teacher said if you memorize all 28, or not memorize, if you memorize, he said you get 1 point for all the numbers you say correctly in pi. He did it as an extra credit at the end of the year, and I knew I had a D at the time. So I had a couple weeks and I would just study pi and I would start memorizing using my memory skills, like techniques that I would learn. And I would kept doing this and this. And I passed algebra because I learned all. He was so impressed. He literally in front of all the class was like, how the heck did you get? Because he's like 29, the 29th number I got wrong. And so it's just like, oh, I just memorized and that. And and to me, that was an accomplishment, proudest moment. I may have not liked algebra. I may have been so frustrated with algebra here and here and there, but I left on a good note, a high note. And
Mhm.
it's the kind of thing, it's yeah, what we have sucks, but also what we have is awesome in a way that I see it as something where, like I said to you, it's a gift and a curse. But now as an adult, I see it as I can relate to you, you can relate to me, I can relate to even kids without NVLD who are just going through things because I remember what it was like and I feel and I don't know if everybody who has NVLD is very empathetic, which or has a lot of empathy um in that regard, but it's I think MLD kind of like going through what I went through with it and learning from it and learning from each experience I had from it made me a very a person with a lot of empathy. It's so funny to say empathetic because then there's pathetic, but it doesn't make me pathetic. You know
Right.
what I mean? Empathetic and pathetic are two different things. It's just that. But yeah, so I think that's what I mean, hang in that you'll love and appreciate MVLD for. And and also you'll find things that you know you love and appreciate about yourself that has nothing to do with MVLD as well. And it's a journey. It's a weird thing to say, but it
No,
is
it is a
truly.
journey.
And it's a journey for anybody any age. It's I was talking to somebody at NVLD project months ago about this because we were talking about blogs and we were just talking, her and she said to me that some people until like their 60s, they didn't know they had it. And that to me was like, and I found out when I was 9. And it's like you think about that range, a 9-year-old versus somebody, so they lived all the way up to like, for 60 years without knowing they had it, but now they have it. And I don't know. You said something earlier about it could come off of a trauma, which maybe it is. I'm used like because I don't see MVLD as something like you catch as a cold or like for instance, my dad had diabetes, which is a disease, and he got it when he was 50 years old and still lives with it today. Like he manages it and all that. And I don't see it MVLD as something you catch and then you have to deal with it. I see something for me because I was born with it. That's where, and everybody sees it differently. They have
Mhm.
their own story and everything like that. And I think that's so important is that everybody has their own story with it, but you're also not alone with it. And that's, yeah. And that's, yeah, I guess that's what I mean. There's so much more I could say. And I mean,
Well, I think you've definitely answered the question.
yeah.
I would agree with not being alone and trying to listen and being patient because, like you said, it it can be hard to be patient, but you kind of have to be when you have NLD because of all the challenges you might go through and
Yeah.
trying to um, figure out how long it might take to go through it.
I agree with you. I think you have to have patience too. And I think I haven't really elaborated on this and won't elaborate much, but I also think stand up for yourself is a huge thing.
Yeah.
Um, because I owe it to my mom, especially my mom and my dad too. But I mean, in middle school, there are girls who would be like, or guys too, would be like, oh, I'm just kidding. Like they would say something mean to me, and then they knew I was naive or gullible, so they'd be like, "Oh, I'm just kidding," to say like it was a cop out for them to be like, "Oh, I'm joking." And my mom then gave me this line where it's like, you could say right back to them, "Well, that's not funny," and sometimes things are too serious to be, funny,
Hmm.
which is true. Now, sometimes things are everybody has a right to be sarcastic and that, but I had to find fine line, and dry sense of humor as well, which is different. But everybody has, I had to find that line of somebody crossing it and being mean, and then somebody doing that. And I found that line, but I only found that line through standing up for myself and standing up for others as well. Um, I think, it's so important to be vocal instead of keeping it in. As somebody who did keep it in, I kept it in. And it taught me a lot about myself, but it also made me realize that there was nothing to be afraid. I
Right.
mean, in a way. And also too, and I'm gonna say this right now, if you have those people in your life that are just being total, I want to say the A word, but I don't know if
I know
that's,
what you mean. Yeah,
yeah,
I mean,
the a-holes. There you go. Total
yeah.
a-holes. And if you don't, total meanies, total bullies. And I'm speaking to anybody out there right now who's that and you're dealing with them, like, and you stand up for them or you try to get your voice heard and they're trying to silence you in any way or like be mean to you, like move on from them. Because something I've also learned, that NVLD related or not, is that the toxic people in your life are not worth having. And people can change, but for those who don't want to change and don't, and are just going to treat you the same way they're going to treat you, you have every right to stand up for yourself and just be like, all right, well, either this needs to happen or I'm going. Like I'm moving
Right.
on from different people, like to hang out with different people or to be around different people. And that's also something I've very learned, very appreciative of having that for myself, because I think that's an important message out there is like, I think, yeah, you're not alone. Be patient, listen, but also use your voice because you have a voice. And that
Hmm.
voice, part of that voice, or a big chunk of that voice has NVLD in it. And it's your way of, whether or not with NVLD in situations, it's just a way to say, stand up for yourself. I mean, if we're talkers here, I mean, I think the NVLD made us very verbal people. And it's a way to use that not as a weapon, but as a, I guess you could say a weapon, but not to be hurtful to somebody else, but to stand up for yourself in a way.
Hmm.
Don't be hurtful to anybody else, but stand up for yourself for sure. Um, yeah. And that's it. That's all.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I definitely try to stand up for myself and be able to, you know,
I'm still
make,
listening. I'm just charging. Sorry.
oh, it's okay. Make other people, understand me. Well, not make, but try to help them understand me and
Mhm.
be able to be an advocate for people with NVLD because sometimes they don't have anybody.
Mhm.
Um, and, I can relate to that in some ways because, yes, I do have people, but like you were saying earlier, I don't know anybody in person who has NLD, and it would be nice to know that because
Yeah.
it's true. If you can talk with somebody online who is an NVLD, but you have to wait for them to respond if
Yeah.
need support on something. Rather, if they're in person, then they're
Yeah.
right there.
And I will say I would agree with that. And also too, for me, and the experience was experience for mine was, there was a person who said they had NVLD. This was a couple of years ago. And this was through like, and we started messaging each other, or talking to each other, but they were starting to ask so many personal questions where I did not feel comfortable
Mm,
answering. And I don't think they realized that, because whatever severe, mild, or whatever case they have with MVLD, they were trying to make a friend here.
right.
Versus me, who I've had experiences where, not saying I've had stalkers in my own like that, but like I've just had people who just wouldn't leave me alone. So like it came to a point where like and I'm also very, I like my privacy and all that kind of thing. So if I that so in that regard, and I hate to say it, but I blocked him because it was the only thing I could think of. I felt bad, but he didn't
Hmm.
get the message, or she didn't get the message, he or she. I'm not gonna say if it was a girl or guy, but they didn't get a message, if like
They didn't get
that,
your point.
Right. That like if I wasn't responding, because it was like either the same, like it was like, and they were very sweet and very nice, but it was just, you're a stranger. I don't know you. I've never met you. I've never even FaceTime you and everything like that. And so, and also it was coming out of a time too where I was going very public. I wasn't just telling my friends or my family, but I was chose at that point to be a part of the NVLD project and put myself out there in the public eye with strangers of, hey, this is what I have. And even on my like my social media channels of like promoting my blogs and stuff and
Mhm.
NVLD. And I started because someone told me with that with my career, like I'll bring it up during my career and like nowadays where in the beginning I wouldn't, but someone did say to me, well, it's not a sad story, it's a triumph story, and you can help people can help relate to you without NVLD, you know, NVLD or not. And I said, oh, you're right. It's more of a triumphant story. So I've started, so it came around that time of like, I wasn't really, I've started being more open and vocal about it. But yeah, I just think like in that, gosh, I'm gonna say retrograde again, but yeah, in that retrograde, it's a way of, yeah, like I apologize if that person's listening to that right now. That I apologize for blocking you, but like it was too much too soon and it was just a lot. And it's, I think, and my hope, and I think you agree, is that at some point it's not going to be like that anymore. It's not going to be for us in general with MVLD of like kind of this cautious feeling we have before we say it to anybody, even those we have with MVLD, you
Right.
know, if we're talking to them. Um, and I think at some point, hopefully, because there's so much more research done, that will be the case. And I agree with you on what we were discussing earlier was until like it does get into like the public eye more, then it would be more like well known and accepted. Yeah, but I mean, it's not that it's not accepted now. It's more so just people who don't. I wrote it down. I wish I had it in that, but it was something I came to the conclusion of like people who don't know something when they first hear it. We're all in this we're all live in the world
Mhm.
where what we hear and what we see or what we know and what we learn is from growing up. So this is all that we've taken from growing up and what we've learned, and this is how we hear it and see it and know about it. And then something new comes along, and whenever something new comes along, it creates that apprehension feeling and a cautious feeling, and we don't want, we don't want to take that in right away. We don't want to like accept it or get to know what that is right away because we don't know what it is and we
Right.
don't know. Yeah, we're unsure about it. So it's a slow process of uh not even process, that's the wrong word, it's a slow journey of getting to know anything that's new
Mhm.
and anything that is something that is so big like NVLD, because it's big in the sense of a bunch of people have it, and it's, even though it's still a like three, even though 3% of the population have it, I think 3% at least America's population is what, like a million or so people, or maybe 100, I don't know. I would have to do the math, and if anybody
Mhm.
knows, everybody could look up the math when they need to. But it's like there's still, I mean, it's not just me that has it. It's not just you and me that have it. It's not just me and those who are work with the NVLD project that have it. It's a bunch of other people that have it. But
Right.
still, that's so small compared to like the billions of people who live in America and the 7 billion here who live in the world. So yeah, it's, oh gosh, it's just thinking about all that. It's yeah, it's such a slow journey, but it's comes to acceptance. And yeah, I mean, that's, I've totally lost my train of thought just
Oh, it's
thinking of
okay.
the
I was
math
gonna.
thing. Sorry, when I get to like, oh, math, I all of a sudden like try to math it, like try to solve it, think of like the number, and I'm like, oh wait, what was I talking about? Math distracts me. So very apologetic and apologize to people who are like listening something, went on to a different topic, and now I'm just like, wait, what was I talking about?
No, it's okay. And today I am very excited to announce that BetterHelp is now sponsoring this podcast. I have had 7 years of therapy, so I know it can help change your life if you not only let it, but work on the personal goals that you set with your therapist. Without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy works. But what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles and start feeling better because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist. So you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's more affordable than in person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. Join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are the greatest asset. And special offering to listeners of Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/. I'll put in the link in the podcast description for you. That's BetterHelp, HELEP. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast. As I wrap up, there are some things I would like to share with you. I do have a website for this podcast. It is called livingwithnld.com. I also have a Facebook and Instagram page for this podcast. It is called Living with NLD. I will include the links for those in the description. In conclusion, I would like to hear from my audience. If you know individuals with NLD that I could interview for this podcast, please email me at livingwithnld@gmail.com. What are you interested in learning about NLD? I know I'm not an expert, but I do know I have the living experience of having it. I would like you to practice journaling about your gifts and differences. Also see if there is a way that you can make that difference become easier for you to do than it originally was. Thank you for listening today, and please go to my YouTube channel and subscribe to it. Thank you. Bye.